Good afternoon. We are starting a class today that hopefully will keep us busy for the next couple of months. It is one of my favorite books, one of the most important books that were written during the Middle Ages, during the time of the Rishonim. The book is called the Kuzari, okay? And was written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. And we're going to talk a little bit about Rabbi Yehuda Halevi today, about why he wrote the book, and then we'll get into the book and why it's so important. So Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was born around, we don't know 100%, but around 1075. So that's a long time ago for those of you who need to take off your socks to count, right? And he died no earlier than 1141. We have a letter that says that he was going to board a ship in May of 1141 from Alexandria going to Israel, to the city of Akko. We know that the ship did not leave on time, but that is the last reference that we have of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. The next reference that we have says that he died. So, and I think I saw that the letter says that he died sometimes in June. So we know they didn't die earlier than May 1141. So who was he? So he was born most likely in a city called Tudela. Some people think he was born in Toledo. So if you look up in the history books on Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, both of those cities were cities under Muslim rule in Spain. So his youth and most of his life he spent living in, or his younger days, living under a Muslim regime. Once the southern Spain was invaded by Muslims from North Africa. There was a group called Almoravids, Almorabitun in Arabic. They made life very, very difficult for Jews. And so Jews started moving from southern Spain up north to Christian Spain. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi also did. He moved from the south to the north. And then eventually he left Spain, went to Egypt, and he spent a while in Egypt. And then we know that he was going to take a ship from Alexandria to Eretz Israel, and then we don't know what happened to him. So there's a legend that he entered Eretz Israel. He traveled from Akko, which is up north, to Jerusalem, and he was trampled by a Muslim with his horse entering the gates of Yerushalayim. That's a legend that is about 450 years older than Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. So whether it's true or not, I don't know. But we don't really have early sources of telling us of what happened to him. So what did he do? He was a physician. He came from a very, it sounds like a wealthy family, had a very, very good upbringing, very strong educational background. He knew the Tanakh inside and out. He had a thorough education in Hebrew grammar, Arabic grammar. He knew philosophy very well. He knew adab literature, which is Arabic literature of the time. He knew Gemara. He studied. He had a connection with the Migash, Rabbeinu Yosef Migash. Rabbeinu Yosef Migash was in a city called Lucena. Lucena is a city, if you look in Spain, on the coast, Mediterranean. It was where the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, came from North Africa, went to Spain, and he opened his yeshiva in Lucena. And the Rif, who lived a very long time, I think he was in his 90s when he passed away. I'm not so sure. I don't have to check that again. He decided to leave the yeshiva to his top student, who at the time was very, very young, younger than all of you, I think. And he, well, maybe not. Maybe he's not as young as you. But he left the yeshiva to Rabbi Yosef Migash, the Ri Migash. And Rabbi Halevi seemed to have known him and studied with him. How much, I don't really know. But that we know that much. Rabbi Halevi is one of the four most important poets of Hebrew poetry from the time of the Golden Age of Spain. Okay, the four greatest poets are Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid, then you have Shlomo ibn Gabirol, you have Moshe ibn Ezra, not related to Avraham ibn Ezra from the Chumash, and you have Yehuda Halevi. There are lots of others a lot of other poets, very, very important poets, who wrote poetry both for liturgy, for prayer, which we have in Sidurim, and also they wrote secular poetry. Beautiful, beautiful poetry. Mamash. I mean, it's amazing, amazing poems. His Diwan is a collection of poetry of the Rabbi Halevi survived. And there's a few hundred poems in there. So that's what he was known to be, a poet. He traveled down to Granada. Granada was in southern Spain. It was a kingdom where there was a contest for poetry. And he somehow entered this contest, wrote a poem, became well known, and became a student of Moshe ibn Ezra, which is one of the other four, right? I mentioned his name. He was a very wealthy and famous poet, very distinguished. He was an elder statesman compared to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and he took on Yehuda Halevi, who was probably around 16, 17 years old, as a protege. He lived with him. He taught him. They learned together. Moshe ben Ezra wrote some books. One of his books is he wrote a theory of Hebrew poetry. It's a very, very interesting text. I'm not so sure if it exists in Hebrew. I studied it in Arabic. It's a very interesting text. Moshe, he quotes verses from the Torah, like I don't know, Ukrainian war heroes. He knows them like that. It's very, very interesting work. So Rabbi Yehuda Halevi studied with him, but then when the Almoravids came and there was a lot of turmoil, he left Muslim Spain to Christian Spain. He became a physician. Sounds like he got married. He had a son. It looks like he had a son and daughter. There is a source that says that his daughter married Avraham ibn Ezra's son. And they had a son that they called Yehuda Halevi. And there's a letter by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi leaving some property, some of his personal belongings, to his grandson, who's named Yehuda Halevi, in Egypt. So we know that Avraham ibn Ezra and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi were friends. They traveled together. They discussed various topics, and Avraham ibn Ezra actually brings some of the questions or answers of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in his commentary on the Chumash. And so it's very interesting to see two giants, two Rishonim, Avraham ibn Ezra and Yehuda Halevi, they know each other, they're close to one another, and if according to one source, they actually married their children to one another. So that's Yehuda Halevi. He's a very, very interesting figure. But for us, we're not doing a seminar on his poetry, but we're looking at the book that he wrote called the Kuzari. Now, he wrote it in Arabic towards the later part of his life. And it seems to be, he took a historical event and wrote around that historical event. What do I mean by that? So the book is called, we call it the Kuzari. That's not the name that he actually gave to his own book. I just want to see if this translation has the full name. If not, I will bring you the full name of the book. Let me just see if I can find it. It is the book of answers or proofs to the arguments against the despised religion. We are the despised religion, and bringing proofs for defending it. Okay? That was the name of this treatise or this book. In short, we call it the Kuzari. So remember, when was the First Crusade? Do you guys know your history? The First Crusade is 1095, right? They reached Jerusalem in 1096. It is a battle between the Christians who came from Europe against the Muslims to conquer Jerusalem, and they actually conquered Jerusalem. The Christians conquered Jerusalem. They slaughtered the Jews in the city of Jerusalem at the time, and they create a kingdom, the kingdom of Jerusalem, baronial armies. In the meantime, the Jews in Europe, specifically in France and in Germany, northern France and in Germany, Speyer, Mainz, and Worms, those communities are destroyed along with others. Jews are being forcibly converted in the name to the Christianity, in the name of the crusade. It's a very volatile time where you have two major religions fighting one another, and obviously we are the despised ones. And that's the sort of milieu, that's the historical background to what's happening that this book is trying to explain. Also, Rabbi Halevi chose the name Kuzari because of something that happened from the time of the Kuzari, that he wrote this book, probably happened sometimes in the 200 years earlier, approximately. There was a kingdom in the Caucasus called Khazars. You ever heard of them? This group of people, there was a king, and was surrounded by Christian and Muslim neighbors, decided along with the upper class to convert to Judaism. He seemed to have had formal connections to some Jewish, I don't know what to call them, scribes, I'll just use that for lack of a better word, in Spain. I think his name was Chazdai bin Shaprut, that wrote him letters to the kingdom. And those letters somehow survived. If you do research on that, if you're interested, you'll find more information. And the Khazar people converted to Judaism around the 800s, 50, 890, something around that period. And Rabbi Halevi knew of this, and he took their conversion as a backdrop for this book, which the book is going to be a dialogue between the king of the Kuzari people with various religious figures until he makes a decision to convert to Judaism, brings a rabbi to teach him Judaism, and then he converts, and then the rabbi and the king have a series of dialogues divided into 5 different books about Judaism. Okay? When we are a very old religion, 3,500 years, but there aren't many books that present Judaism in a systematic organized fashion. Right? If you pick up the Mishnayot, when you learn Mishnah, they're not really starting from the beginning, right? Taking you through a certain set order of understanding what Judaism is about. You can't do that with a Gemara, and you can't do that with Shulchan Aruch or Mishnah Berurah. You don't have that. You have Derech Hashem of the Ramchal. He does that. He presents Judaism in a systematic way. You have the Kuzari, right? There's a difference between the Ramchal and the Kuzari for about 600 years. And you also have probably the Tanya does the same thing, presenting Judaism in a systematic, methodological way. But this is very, very early in our history. There aren't others that I'm aware of. There are books that are in particular fields in Judaism, whether it's in Kabbalah, whether it's in history, whether it's this, or whether it's that. We don't have a book that takes Judaism from the beginning to the end. Here's what the religion's about. Here's how it works. And this work does it. This explains everything you want to know about Judaism. Okay? So we're going to start. It was written, as I told you, in Arabic, in something called Judeo-Arabic, which is Arabic, a dialect of Arabic that the Jews were using. And when they wrote it in Hebrew letters, which means it's Arabic in Hebrew letters. So just in the same way that Yiddish is, right, German in Hebrew letters, and Ladino is Spanish in Hebrew letters, and there are other Jewish languages that they use the script, Hebrew script. This was written in Judeo-Arabic. It was translated by Rabbi Yehuda ben Tibon. The translation is a bit cumbersome because it follows Arabic syntax. It's kind of hard to follow if you don't know Arabic well. This is the first book I learned when I came to NYU as a graduate student, was to compare a new translation to English with the Arabic. So I got to work with the Judeo-Arabic for more than a year on the Kuzari, and whenever I teach it, I try to use the Arabic. And interestingly, this morning I found out that on Sefaria they also have an Arabic translation of the Kuzari. I have to check if it's the same one that is the Judeo-Arabic version, because they don't use Hebrew letters, they use the Arabic alphabet. So I have to verify that it's the same. So at home there's a critical edition of the Judeo-Arabic edition, so I have to check it with what they have on Safari to see if it's the same thing. And if so, then it'll make life a little easier for some of us. Okay. You ready to start? Yes. Good. So we're going to start with the first treatise, and it begins as follows. He says there was a king that had a dream. Had a dream. And we will see with the context that this king had a recurring dream, which means it happened to him a few times. And it said the following. Angel appeared to him, and it says, your intention is accepted by God. Your intention is good. However, your actions are not wanted. That is, what you want, your intention, your heart is at the right place. But the actions that you're doing are wrong. These are not the right actions. And the king was very diligent in the commandments of the pagan religion of the Kuzaris, of the Khazars. And he was serving in their temple, offering all sorts of sacrifices. And yet, the more he was doing, and the more he was investing in this religion, the dream would come back and say the same thing. That your kavana, your intention is good, is accepted by God, but your actions are rejected. And he wanted to investigate other religions. Okay? That's how the book begins. So now that's our sort of setup. So if you were the Kuzari, you were the king, and you're having this recurring dream that an angel comes to you and tells you, look, I get you want to be close to me. I understand you want to have a relationship with me. But the way you're going about it is wrong. Who would you invite first to have a conversation about God?
Top other religions.
What?
A priest from other religions.
A priest from other religions. Which religion would you start with?
Christians.
Christians. Why Christians?
They're the most popular back there, like on the right.
They were more popular. Well, I'm not so sure they were more popular, but okay. He didn't invite the Christian. Who do you think he invited?
Jews.
Jews. No, why would he invite Jews?
We were everywhere.
What?
We were everywhere.
We were everywhere. We weren't in the Kuzari kingdom.
Okay. Muslims.
Muslims. No, he did not invite a Muslim. Not a Buddhist.
But that was like
Not a Hindu. So now we're running out of religions.
he was inviting priest of his own religion.
No, he knew he was the expert. He invited a philosopher.
Which one?
A philosopher. Now, today we say, when you say you have a philosopher, like what type of philosopher? Well, what options were there in the 12th century?
Arabic. Greek.
Well, you should know that you really had two major schools of philosophy at the time of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. You have Aristotelians, people who will follow the teachings of Aristotle, and people that were what we would call them today Neoplatonists. Okay? But for this early period in sort of the history of ideas, there was one group of what we would call Andalusian or Spanish philosophers. You could lump them all together. And it didn't matter if you were a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim. If you were a philosopher, you were your own group to an extent. So he invites a philosopher and he tells him the story of what's happening, where he's telling him what? What's in the dream?
Intentions are right.
That my intentions are good, but my actions are wrong. And he says, tell me, according to you, Mr. Philosopher, what should I do? Tell me about your beliefs. Says the philosopher, God has no will, no hate, nor hatred, and he is above all will and intention. What does that mean? What did he just tell him?
He doesn't care about your intention.
God does not have a will.
So there is no wrong or right action to take.
There's no right or wrong action to take. Or God doesn't want you to take actions or not take actions. Because wanting, right, he says because intention teaches or points to that there is something missing in God. That's why he wants it. When I want something, it means I don't have it. If I want a cup of water, it means that I'm what? Thirsty. I'm missing something. Don't all jump at once. But if you express your thoughts as that you want something, it implies you're missing it. And if you're missing it, it says that you're imperfect. And the philosopher claims that God is perfect. And if God is perfect, God doesn't want anything. God doesn't have a will. He says the following. He says, God, according to the philosophers, is beyond the knowledge of individuals. Because individuals change from moment to moment. Which is true. One day you're here, sitting with Rabbi Leskin, and the next second you're down here giving the microphone to the rabbi. That's a change, right? One day you are in South Africa, the next day you're in Yerushalayim. That's a change. And if God knew individuals, since individuals change, then what would happen to God? God would also change. And change means that he's being affected by something outside of him. Therefore, it's a lack of perfection. That God, it would make God imperfect. And the philosopher continues, the knowledge of God is impossible to change. God is all-knowing, which means it doesn't change. Right? So let's say if God has knowledge of this world having, I don't know how many people do live in the world today. 8 billion? How much?
8 billion.
8 billion. So he knows that there's 8 billion people. Well, now there is more than 8 billion because 3 people died and then 10 babies were born. So that has to change, no? The algorithm has to change. So the philosopher is claiming that God can't know individuals. Because if God knows individuals, then his knowledge is going to change. And God is unchanging and his knowledge is unchanging. So any change implies imperfection. And he says, God does not know you. Now think about that. The king invited the philosopher to come and help him with his dream. And what does the philosopher tell him? You're crazy. God doesn't know you. And God certainly doesn't know your intentions or actions. Nor does he listen to your prayers, nor see your action, your movement. God has nothing to do with you. You're on your own here, buddy. That's what the philosopher is pitching to the king. But the king knows what he experienced. And the philosopher says, God created you. That's true. Created you, but that is a metaphor. It's not literal. Why? Because although God is the cause of all causes, but nothing was created by God intentionally. Because God doesn't have intention. And the God never created man. Why? Because the philosopher tells him because the universe is eternal. Universe always existed. And if the universe always existed, then guess what? Every human being came from another human being. Where did you come from? Your parents. Where do they come from? Same. Yeah. The same parents. Their parents, right? And their parents came from their parents, and their parents, right? And it goes on forever and ever. Have you ever met a baby that did not come from their parents? No. If there's a baby, there must be a parent. And so the philosopher is telling him, the metaphor of God being your creator is in a sense because he is emanating, affecting the entire universe as the first cause. But the universe has always been here. He sustains this, but it's unchanging, sort of like radio waves. You know, they just keep, there's a hum. That's it. And so he says, no person was ever born not from a previous human being. And his form, his abilities, his natures, his characteristics all come from his parents and from other relatives. And some of his qualities are dependent on the environment, the landscape, the weather. We're all affected by the world around us. They're affected also by the food that you have, by the water quality. If you have quality air and water, you're going to have a better outcome for your health. So there are, we would say, natural and nurturing, right? Those are the two aspects. Some of it are you're born with, and some of them is you're getting because you were lucky. Because your parents live in an affluent country as opposed to living in, I don't know, South Africa. And so, the philosopher continues, and then you're also shaped by the celestial forces, the astronomical powers. Now, for us, it sounds very strange. What? You want to tell me that the stars have an effect? Isn't that astrology? Isn't this kind of Looney Tunes? Well, to an extent, I'm just going to give you an argument to look at it in a more positive light. Not that I necessarily endorse this position. But we know for a fact that the moon affects people's mood. Why? Because the moon affects the earth with its gravity. And when there's a full moon, right, you have tide, right? And since we're made up of a lot of water, then when the moon has an effect on the oceans, it also has an effect on us. So it could theoretically affect the moods of human beings. And if the moon has such an effect, is it possible that Saturn would have some effect that we haven't detected yet? Could be. So the philosophers in the Middle Ages were sure, but also that goes back to the Greeks, were sure that the celestial bodies, the planets and the stars had an effect on human beings. Okay? I don't want to get into what is the Jewish view of astrology, because it's a machlokes. There are sources that will tell you that astrology is a thing, and you have sources that would say, no, it isn't. So that's a separate talk. Maybe you could speak to Rabbi Gottlieb if you're interested on astrology, and you can take it from there. So the Kuzari continues, and he says, anything that exists in this world, think of anything that you, give me an example of something.
Chair.
A chair. Oh, great. The chair has lots and lots of causes until it became the chair that it is today. Think of a cat, right? We saw the cat. There's a cat trap upstairs. I don't know why. If you don't put food in, they're not going in. But think of a cat. How many causes are there for this cat to actually exist? Right? And it's not only the existence of these cats, of the parents, but those require a long series of causes to bring about a particular effect. And so there's long chain of causes. And if the universe is eternal, which means always was, then you would have an infinite chain of causes leading to you. Now, in our Jewish view, which we're going to get into, the Halevi is going to explain to the Jewish view, we're going to say the world exists 5,784 years, right? How many causes do you think would need to bring you into existence? Lots of them. Lots and lots of them. And so he says that the first cause caused whatever it's causing, not through intentions, but rather through what is called emanation. Emanation is given, the example that is given to explain what emanation or how emanation would work is if you had sunlight that penetrates stained glass, so that when it comes, you see that different vessels or different glasses provide different color light, but it's the same light. It's just coming through different kalim or vessels. Another idea of emanation is when you have a candle and you light from that candle another candle. How many candles do you think you can light from one candle?
An unlimited amount.
And that candle would continue to shine.
An infinite amount.
Why?
Because when giving fire to another candle, it never takes away from
Doesn't diminish. Excellent. That's the process of emanation, as is given by medieval texts. So that you have this entity, this first cause, which he calls God. He is sort of this sunlight or this flame that is sort of, you can cause this. It just keeps going and going and going. Okay? And he says from the first cause, you get the second cause. And from the second cause, you get the third and the fourth, and then so on and so forth, until you get to you. And it goes all the way, and the first cause was eternal. It always was there. There wasn't a time where the first cause wasn't causing. It was always causing. And therefore, according to the philosopher, he's telling this king that the God that he's searching for is certainly not the God of philosophy. There's something, I'm going to stop here just for a second because there's something that all of you should be asking. I asked, what should he invite first? Who should he invite first? And the answer that was given was a priest of other religions. So why is he inviting a philosopher? Because Rabbi Halevi understands that one of the threats to Judaism, to Jewish identity, is philosophy that presents itself as a natural religion. That philosophy in the 12th century was viewed as a competing worldview, a competing religion with its own logical arguments for their, what we would say, religious beliefs.
almost like atheism nowadays.
Almost like atheism. Well, to an extent, yes, but I think that the logical or rational basis for this philosophy is more grounded in the rational basis for atheism. But it's a very strange situation to think of philosophy as a religion. And we're going to go through this because the king is going to ask, so how does this work? How do I want to join your religion? Is there like a mosque, a church? It doesn't matter. All those things don't matter. You could be in anything you want. As long as you ascribe to the teachings of the philosophers. And we are going to get into them next time. Let's stop and continue next time.